Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sukhee from Yonsei University. It's my great honor to have a moderator role in this session. This session is China and the ROK, U.S.-Japan Virtual Alliance. I think this is a very sensitive issue. So I think the most important questions that in this session is how does China view ROK, U.S.-Japan strategic cooperation and the intentions of the United States? And to what extent would ROK, U.S.-Japan strategic cooperation be a response to China's rise? How does China view the three countries' trilateral efforts to address North Korea? Given the frictions between South Korea and Japan, where can trilateral cooperation be most effective, and how might such cooperation affect the three countries' relations with China? So with those kind of questions, we'd like to discuss 15 minutes. Its time is very short, so my role, the most important role of mine would be the time control. So we have a strategic kind of setting over here, so I'd like to follow these rules and then I'd like to proceed this session. Before we start our discussion, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. I'd like to introduce from the far left, Ambassador Shin Bong-kil, Secretary General of Trilateral Cooperation Secretary, joined the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade in 1978, and his latest posts include the spokesperson of the Korean Foreign Ministry, Ambassador to Jordan, and Ambassador of International Economic Cooperation at MOFAT, BA from Seoul National University, and MA from the University of North Korean Studies in Korea. The next person is Professor Gilbert Rozman, very renowned professor. He's a Musgrave professor of sociology at Princeton University, has taught at Princeton University since 1970. And he got BA from Carleton College, PhD in sociology from Princeton University. He has numerous books, and his recent book include East Asian National Identities. And next person is Professor Nishino, Junya. He's a good friend of mine, actually. He's associate professor in the political science department and the faculty of law and politics at Keio University. Also a Japan scholar at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars and a visiting scholar at George Washington University. Was a special analyst on Korean affairs in the intelligence and analysis service of the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And BA and MA from Keio University, and PhD in political science from Yonsei University. And actually, he's my colleague. And his Korean is better than mine. And finally, next person would be Professor Changzheng. He's Dean of the School of International Relations at the University of International Business and Economics. Also serves as director of the Association of Chinese Political Studies and Council of China National Association of Universities for International Studies. Was a visiting research fellow at Harvard Kennedy School and a postdoctoral researcher at Seoul National University, and PhD in politics from the Renmin University of China in 2001. So with this kind of background, we'd like to start our discussion today. So I like to, I don't want, but I like to give you the time limit. Total session time would be 1 hour and 15 minutes. Presentation time would be 5 to 7 minutes per speaker. So please keep the time. And if you just unintentionally surpass the time, then I'll give you some warning. So please follow my directions too. So would you please start with Professor?
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like first to express my thanks to the moderator and organizers. And this is really a big event here. And, I'm lucky to be the first speaker of this afternoon. Mm-hmm. So the topic regarding the East Asian is very big. Put together all the four countries together, it has become a very complicated problem for me. And anyhow, it is reasonable to put the four countries together because geographically the four countries are thought of locating in the same Asian Pacific region. And personally, I think we need more constructive viewpoints of looking at the issues that addressing the East Asian, the four countries. Regarding that, in this area, there exist many hot issues such as the maritime sea passage of the South China Sea, the nuclear issue in Peninsula, and the maybe territorial disputes between nations. And they need really more mutual understanding and engagement and cooperation among the four nations. And the most critical point for the four nations is that not to perceive, not with the misperception of the other side's intention. Rather, they should try to know the core interests of the other sides. And in whatever aspects that keep peace and the stability of the region is to all the interests of the four nations. And now, the people of academicians are fond of talking about the leadership in this region. I do not know whether it is an appropriate question for such a region. Personally, I do think that we need, the four countries need to take its own unique rules, responsibilities, and also seek its own unique interests through cooperation and engagement and mutual interaction. The most critical point is that all stakeholders in the region should take its own responsibility and play their unique roles in keeping the peace and the stability of this region. And you know, just this morning, Dr. Kim Chan-rong talked about the new types relationships among the big powers. As far as I know, that what the CPC Central Committee expressed in its political report is that all the big powers should not seek their interests through waging power or seeking to balance the powers using the tactics of balancing power. Rather, they should seek to build a solidary foundation for cooperation or mutual engagement. And regarding the four countries, I think that there are some urgent things that the countries can do. The first is politically they should keep the peace and stability of the region. The second is that economically they should continue to accelerate the cooperation and the trade in this region. And the third is that culturally they should try to promote the mutual interaction among the countries. In such a way, it is to all the core interests of the four nations. It is even true to China, because for China, it is a main concern for China to keep the domestic stability. And that is to solve the domestic problem is the first priority to China. And even with so, China needs a peaceful and stable environment for its own economic development. And it is even for the core interest of Korea, because Korea can play a very important role of coordinator and maybe in the trilateral relationships of China, U.S., and Korea. And for Japan, it is rather to keep a peace and stability of East Asian region. It is rather to Japan's interest, because Japan needs to pull out of the economic stagnation trap. And this is what I think is the most critical for the four nations. I do not know whether there is a real or virtual alliances among the three nations against China. And how I think that all the nations should take its own responsibility and play its unique roles to construct a mechanism and architecture to solve the problems that faced by all the nations in Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You very keep the time. Thank you very much for helping me. Next is Professor Nishino Junya.
Yes, thank you, Professor Han. It's my great pleasure to participate in this conference. I extend my thanks to the Asan Institute for the invitation. I will speak about the Japanese perspective of ROK, Japan-US Trilateral cooperation, with a focus on the weakest link of this triad or relationship between Japan and South Korea. We know the relationship between the two countries is difficult at times. President Lee's visit to the islet on August 10 has weighed heavily on the relationship between Tokyo and Seoul. But prior to this incident, Tokyo and Seoul tried to promote security cooperation for several years. For example, Tokyo and Seoul signed the memorandum on joint defense exchange in April 2009, and in 2010, Japanese self-defense force officers for the first time observed US-South Korea joint military exercise. Likewise, South Korean military officer observed US-Japan joint military exercise, so-called KINSOT, in December of the same year. And moreover, just this past June, both governments were scheduled to sign a bilateral agreement on military intelligence sharing, known as GSOMIA. But just an hour before the ceremony, South Korean government abruptly pulled out due to flaring domestic criticism. President Lee's about-face surprised Japan and left the Japanese distrustful of Lee's government. Many Japanese previously believed President Lee was making big effort to improve the relationship between Tokyo and Seoul. But nevertheless, close cooperation with South Korea remains still important to Japan, because major driving force in this security cooperation has existed, and in some sense is becoming more important. Then, what are the driving forces behind the security cooperation between two countries? First, both governments have made persistent effort toward improved relations. On the Japanese side, the leader of the DPJ government, Democratic Party of Japan, have expressed great interest in cooperating with South Korea. As evidence of this, Seoul was the first official foreign tour for the former Prime Minister Hatoyama and also Noda. And in 2010, Prime Minister Kan Naoto, expressed his apology for the tremendous damage and suffering that Japanese colonial rule inflicted upon Korea. Second, growing security needs in East Asia is a strong driving force for security cooperation between two countries. For Japan, addressing the threat posed by North Korea has been the highest security priority since the end of the Cold War. At this moment, uncertainty and secrecy of the Kim Jong-un regime strongly motivated Japan to share military intelligence with South Korea. And concern regarding China's expanding military activities in the region also pushed Tokyo to pursue security cooperation with South Korea. Third, we cannot ignore the US is promoting Japanese and South Korean military cooperation under the strong pressure of budget cutting in Washington, D.C. The U.S. will continue to make a quiet but strong push for Japan and South Korea security cooperation to lessen the financial burden for the security in the region. So despite the recent tension between Tokyo and Seoul over the territorial issue, Japan continued to feel some sort of pressure for security cooperation with South Korea. That pressure remains high following the escalation of tension between Japan and China over Senkaku Island. So what's the path for Japan and Japan and Korea going forward? First of all, both sides must be aware of the inflammatory nature of the historical issue and must avoid unnecessarily politicizing them in a nationalistic way. New Japanese leader after the coming election, maybe LDP leader Abe, must come to understand that due to the long historical memory of the South Korean population, South Korean politicians must endure extraordinary political risk when they seek to expand their relationship with Japan. Likewise, new South Korean leader must know the revival of Japanese militarism cannot happen in today's Japan. Revitalization of political network between Tokyo and Seoul following the both elections is necessary to rebuild trust and deepen mutual understanding. Second, Tokyo and Seoul must make more effort to share one vision of a common regional future. The two countries can play a central role jointly for peace and stability in the region as industrialist democracies. But at the same time, we need to recognize and respect the different perspectives in the geopolitical realities in the region. For example, Tokyo is motivated to promote security cooperation with Seoul, in large part due to uncertainties about China and North Korea. But Seoul does not share the same level of unease about China. Seoul's fear is that the power struggle between Japan and China will escalate into regional matter requiring Seoul's involvement. In addition, for South Koreans, China is an important stakeholder in the future of the Korean Peninsula as an ally and a patron of North Korea, and more importantly, as a signatory of the Korean War armistice. To ease Seoul's concern, Japan should respect and support South Korea's initiative in the Trilateral cooperation among Japan, South Korea, and China. Finally, Tokyo and Seoul must work closely with Washington, which enables Japan-South Korea security cooperation to function more feasibly and effectively. At the same time, through this consultation with Washington, Tokyo and Seoul must attempt to handle tasks which ensure the security cooperation meets their national interest. Fortunately, Japan and South Korea and US have been holding trilateral meetings at various levels to facilitate trilateral cooperation. I hope we develop this framework for the better cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, well prepared, and then it's the right time. So, could you go ahead, Professor Rozman?
This is a conversation, so it's only appropriate that I begin by responding to the comments and putting them in the perspective that I have in mind. And also we began today with some warnings, although they were couched in rather optimistic overall presentations. Warning from Chung Jae-ho that if China may not provoke things, but if something happens, we will see massive retaliation. And so we had Bill Overholt talked about the downward cycle of distrust. So the situation is serious. And I would go so far as to say we're on the brink of a Cold War and that we have to recognize where we are, what has gone wrong from 2008 when things seem to be going so well on so many aspects, including the six-party talks, to end of 2012, where things have been going downhill and they're poised to get further downhill as we look at the Chinese relationship to the alliance and the Japan-South Korean relationship. So I'll respond first to Professor Dai. He talked about we have to observe and recognize each other's core interest. We need to not power balance, but that's sort of seen as the opposite of cooperation. Japan needs to recognize its economic weakness and take that into account in the region. Korea should become a kind of balancer that goes along with the notion of Chinese calling for equidistance between South Korea, between the United States and China. I think these are all prescriptions for leading us further into the Cold War, because I don't think they address the problems and the concerns. They reflect the kind of Chinese narrative that I've been following rather closely over the last few years, which changed, I think, abruptly from a more harmonious status quo emphasis on multilateralism to a very different emphasis, demonizing on many dimensions the United States, Japan, and South Korea increasingly simultaneously, reflected in policies in 2010 and not really reversed, and we're seeing further tendencies this year. So what is the, well, I could go into great detail into what I see as the mainstream Chinese narrative, and some may disagree with aspects of it, but the real issue is the Chinese narrative and the US narrative about what's gone on in the last period and what is needed the next period are very much at odds. We don't see eye to eye on how to deal with North Korea, as opposed to 4 years ago. We don't see eye to eye on how to manage an arms race. We don't see eye to eye on how to deal with the maritime conflicts in the region. There is very little confidence building, and in a lot of ways, this is the way the Cold War emerged. If you followed, as I did, and going way back in my days to the 60s and 70s, the rhetoric about the Cold War from each side, even though we kept trying to improve relations, as I'm sure we will try to do in this period of rising tension, we were unable to do so because of such contrasting narratives and difficulties in resolving things. Take, for instance, the situation in the South China Sea. Do we have a formula for avoiding conflict, for avoiding the potential of use of force by one side, for instance, cutting cables being used for exploration of oil and gas, enforcing no patrols, patrolling, so that ships don't go within a certain territorial water. The language keeps escalating as to what is not permissible and what can be done by China in order to reshape the South China Sea or the East China Sea and the conflict over Diaoyu Sentaku. We now have a shift in the status quo. China is insisting Japan is the cause, but as a result of that, China can do things that cross Japan's red line now, and there's no intention of pulling back. Patrol boats can be circling around this territorial area, whereas they never were before. That is a formula for trouble. The danger of some accidental clash occurring, or maybe not accidental, is heightened very much. So the situation, and I think, in the region has turned bad, and the new leaders are coming in who are likely to call upon nationalist sentiments and be hesitant about pulling back. Now I want to talk a little about South Korea and Japan, because I think in these election campaigns, if you look at them closely, the agendas are sharply in conflict. Of course, if Moon Jae-in and Abe come in, we see the most potential for clashing views about how to handle China. Just when the Japan-China relationship gets tenser, the South Koreans are emphasizing improving relations with China. How to handle the North Koreans. If North Korea tests the missile, maybe then tests the nuclear weapon, is South Korea's response going to be, well, we have to keep engaging. We have to do something unilaterally to change the atmosphere that Lee Myung-bak accepted. Whereas Japan's reaction is, we have to intensify cooperation with the U.S. We have to put more pressure on North Korea. So these are just examples. Now, Abe, with his pungent approach to how to deal with historical issues and the sex slave issue is provocative, to say the least, in ways that no Japanese leader has been towards South Korea. And the South Korean approach this year has been so serious that the Japanese public opinion of South Korea has dropped by about 24%. So the mood in each country is less tolerant of the other, and for the U.S. to manage this relationship is going to be very difficult in these new circumstances. Even if Park wins, odds of Abe not winning seem to be very low, or being able to form a coalition government. So I will conclude by simply saying the challenge for the United States diplomacy, having the right people in the right positions, starting off by trying to solidify ties with Japan to manage Abe's instincts, as I think the U.S. did very constructively 6 years ago, to work closely with South Korea so that there's not a new gap, unlike what is similar to what in the last few years there's been very little gap, and I think that's been very fortunate. All of that, I think, needs to precede a meeting in the late spring or summer with Xi Jinping and Obama to sort of try to stabilize things. But I think if we can't manage our virtual triangle and it becomes a collapsing triangle, the management of these other issues will be much more difficult.
Thank you, Professor Rozman. I thought this is kind of warming up session, but he's already into the hot discussion already. So, are you ready, please, Ambassador Shin? So
yes.
could you? You're the last commenter.
Well, actually, there are two triangles in this Northeast Asian politics. One is U.S.-led, U.S., Japan, Korea triangle, and it is termed as a virtual alliance in this program. And another is China, Japan, Korea triangle. This is more like a regional kind of cooperation kind of framework. And one is kind of bilateralism, based on bilateralism, and another is based on multilateralism. I'll tell this China, Japan, Korea triangle as a CJK triangle. And this CJK triangle has achieved quite a thing in this recent years in its institutionalization efforts through the establishment of the Trilateral Cooperation Secretariat. Actually, this is a very unique and first kind of one established in this Northeast Asian region. In Northeast Asia, there was a kind of organizational gap. There was no kind of organization between the three countries, and this is a very, I think, it's a historic thing, and also. This trilateral cooperation, which I am representing as a Secretary General, has stops from the three countries, seconded by three countries' governments, and also general service staffs from recruited from three countries. They are working together under the one roof, on the equal footing, and in a very harmonious manner. I think it's quite successful. It's a successful experiment that showing that three countries can get together, get along well in a harmonious way, and already this CJK triangle has quite an achievement in institutionalization building. We have annual twice summit meetings and also foreign ministers meetings and 17 other ministerial level meetings. And since the coming of this secretariat, Secretariat is contributing to making documents of, I'm participating at all the trilateral summit and the foreign ministers meeting and even trade ministers meeting. Before our organization has come, there was no official document between the three countries in even summit meeting. But after the coming of this organization, we are making documents and we distribute it to 3 parties and we make it as a database. It's a quite it's an achievement in systemizing this CJK trilateral cooperation. And I also would like to really talk about the emergence of Korea as an important player in this region. For a long time in history, actually Korea has been a shrimp between the 2 whales. And every time the 2 whales fight, Korea break the neck. And it was always the victim of the rivalry between China and Japan. But now Korea, in the last couple of decades, now Korea has grown up, kind of, I may say, the shrimp has changed to become a dolphin, a peace-loving dolphin. And it is first time that Korea became one side of the equilateral kind of a triangle. I think it's quite an achievement that this area can make equilibrium through the emergence of Korea. This year, I think maybe last year, Korea has entered the 2050 club. 20 means more than 20,000 of per capita income, and 50 means more than 50 million population. So it not only demonstrates that Korea has emerged as an important economic and political power, both regionally and globally, but I think that Korea should also play a more active role and take more international responsibility. And incidentally, Korea will chair this coming Trilateral Summit, which will be held in May next year. And Korea is the chair country. And this Trilateral Summit meeting will be held in Korea. And I think the Korea's new president, whoever will be either Park or Moon, I think his or her first job in diplomatic activity will be to preside this Trilateral Summit in Korea. And I think it is all the more important because from three countries, all the new leaders in their 50s with as a new generation, they participate with maybe a new thinking, participate in this summit meeting. And incidentally, this is a very complicated situation in this area with coming of territorial issues and rising nationalism. I think that Korea should take the initiative for peace and co-prosperity, maybe making a big reconciliation in the coming Trilateral Summit meeting. I'll stop it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shin. So now we have about 25 minutes. So for 25 minutes, we are supposed to have a free discussion among the panelists. So maybe Professor Robert Gilman, he said something about China. So do you want to respond against it, Prof. Stein? I think today's key person is you because U.S., China, U.S., Japan, Korea, and
I suppose this discussion is warming, but it has become
warming is
right? over.
Your hot debate is beginning.
Okay, it is really stimulating, and I has already supposed that such questions will appear. As far as I know, that just as I mentioned, that the core issue for China is that China should focus on its main efforts on the domestic questions, such as the most priority for China is that to keep continuing booming the economy in China, and the second is that China should try hard to keep the political stability and also the social stability domestically. And the third is that China needs to escalate the living standard of the people. And all those questions will become the tough problem for the new generations of leaders. And this is the first priority for China to consider. And as for the the Sino-foreign relations, that the first priority for China is that to keep the status quo, maybe is mostly to its core interest for China, because for China's development, there needs more. They need a very stable and maybe peaceful environment for China to keep its economic booming. And it's just Professor Overholt and talked about this morning. And I do not think that the fifth generation are intended to provoke the world, even in the East Asian regions. And people now in China, mostly in the internet, are fond of talking about the U.S. pivoting to East Asian, and to guess in many guess of the intention of the American pivoting to China, and some even think that it is an obvious challenge or dangerous signal to China. But for the policymakers, it is another thing, because for the policymakers to keep the status quo of the East Asian countries is mostly to its policy beforehand. And I don't think that there will be a declaration of war in these areas, even that serious conflicts. Because China, for the leaders of China, they really hope to control the conflict, or even put the conflict under its own control in this area. I don't think that China want to reshape the power formulation of this region, and nor does it think that it has become strong enough to play a dominating role in this area. That's what I.
Professor Rozman, he just mentioned about the core interest of China. Could you explain a little bit more about core interest of China?
Maybe that the core interest for China is that to keep the economic development. For the Sino-foreign relations, I think that some keep the status quo, even relating to the territorial dispute. That is the deadline of China. Other nations, or both China and the other nations, should not change the status quo of the territorial situation now. That is maybe the core interest. Even China do not. I don't think that China does want to change or reshape the situation of the South China Sea. That is what I, as an observer, what I think of.
Professor Rozman, are you agree with this?
Well, I think this is wonderful news, what you said. China's a status quo power, doesn't care about the territorial issues, is just satisfied with the way things have been. So if that's the case, I think China should agree with Japan that Japan should denationalize the islands, but not make sure that Ishihara can't get a hold of them. I think that would be easy for Japan. And China will remove its patrol boats and stop changing the sort of the war balance on the sea. I think it should go back to the code of conduct in the South China Sea. I think it should return to the stance of the six-party talks as they were, with denuclearization in the forefront, not at the end. And if all of those are China's policies, I think we really will avert that Cold War. I don't think any of them have anything to do with China's policies.
Please. As for me, that the policymakers may think that any side should settle down the territorial disputes through negotiation and come down to talk. And one side cannot decide whether to change the status quo of the situation now.
Okay. Professor Nishino?
Yes, thank you. from the Japanese perspective, status quo is not appropriate at this moment. So from Japanese view, we need to back to 2008. In 2008, Japan and China agreed joint investment and development in East China Sea. But actually, Chinese government was very reluctant at that time to implement this agreement. So now, I think we need to back to the 2008. And Professor Rozman's Cold War perspective. Yes, from the U.S. and Chinese perspective, it will become a so-called Cold War. But in the country in the region, this does not mean Cold War. This is a hot war. We will have a conflict. So countries in the region, such as South Korea and Japan, we have to prevent this kind of situation.
Ambassador Shin, what will be Korea's the position toward the U.S., Korea, Japan, the trilateral cooperation? How is your opinion on that?
Well, actually, whenever I come this kind of forum, that my deputies, my staffs, I have two deputies. One is from China and from Japan. They warn me that, Ambassador, you are not a free man, and you should restrict yourself. And sometimes they scrutinize my speeches and statements that it should be completely neutral, and you are not scholar. I'm very much one. And anyway, I am. You see, I think that I talked about two triangles, and I hope that these two triangles can get along well in a harmonious way, not in a competitive way. I think U.S. role, I hope that U.S. engagement in this area also should be a constructive one, not dividing these two triangles. And China, the problem of China is as China is becoming more and more confident, it's more and more aggressive, and sometimes they have the feeling that flex their muscles. And but China, you see, for a long time, in the core of China's international concept, China, Junhua Sishang, China is the center and the others are peripheral. But their relationship was a more kind of cordial one, more give and take less. But so I think China should be restrained a little. See, nowadays it's competing with neighboring countries in territorial issues, and history issues are going to flex the muscle. But I think China can contribute in a certain way in a couple of areas, like I mean territorial issues, of course, and the second maybe the North Korean issues, and the third and FTA, I mean the Trilateral FTA and RCEP. And I think China should show more kind of, ready to give public goods to Korea and Japan. And after all, United States is offering a kind of security insurance to these countries. But what China should do is, in this field, they should show more sincerity and more kind of a conciliatory and compromise kind of attitude. Thank you.
How do you respond, Prestai?
The Chinese government also, as well as the scholars, always thinks that China standpoint is that we should settle down all the disputes, including the trade disputes and the territorial disputes through negotiation. And all the sides should sit down to talk through dialogue to find ways to settle down the problem. This is the standpoint of maybe the government. As I just mentioned, that the government does not want to change the reshape. It has no ambition to reshape the situation of the East Asian region. And of course, there are many things that for China's government thought that mostly important for China is that to first promote the, for example, the trilateral relations through trade or economic cooperation. For example, among the trilateral between among China, and Japan, and Korea. I do think that there was a project of promoting the FTA of the three countries. And as for another trilateral relationships among China, Korea, and America, I think that there is still enough for the three sides to do. For example, to find ways to deepen the cooperation and promote the trade cooperation among the three countries. And in this way, and it's just our Korea colleague has mentioned that South Korea can play a more important role to be a coordinator and maybe among the disputes and in this region. And for Japan, as I just mentioned, is perhaps the most important for Japan is, as just mentioned this morning by Professor Overhaul, that maybe focus on itself on the economic stagnation issue. Perhaps it is most critical for Japan is to pull out of the stagnation trap economically. This is what I just stressed here. Thank you.
Professor Dai just mentioned about U.S., China, Korea trilateral relations. How do you think about that approach, Nishino Junya? U.S., China, Korea. There is no Japan. So, how is your impression about the potential formation of Korea, China, Japan trilateral relationship?
I personally, I agree with this format because, as I mentioned earlier, the future of Korean Peninsula really depends on these U.S., China, and to Korea. This is a very important four nations, and many Korean officials assert this kind of formation. Yeah, I agree. I personally accept this kind of formation. But for the addressing regional problem more broadly, so we need a more appropriate framework such as fiscal talk and 2+2+2. This kind of formula is more appropriate.
Now we are talking about potential of virtual alliance among Korea, U.S., and Japan, and we want to hear about China's response. But Professor Dai's response is so warm, so it's not much debate here. So, how do you think of Professor Rozman? How do you think about our U.S., Korea, Japan, China, the trilateral relations that Ambassador Shin is taking charge?
Well, I think that is a positive step, and I think movement towards an FTA, a trilateral FTA in particular, would be desirable because multiple FTAs, TPP plus CJK and others, can lead to improved cooperation. I think it's going to be very difficult to achieve it if you have a lot of tension, and particularly the signs are that the Korea-China FTA will go forward, and the China-Japan FTA will be more difficult to achieve. And then that comes against the backdrop, I think, of a lot of divisiveness next year where China and North Korea as well are going to try to play on divisions because U.S. South Korean management of security issues is likely to lead to more differences. We have a real possibility of a major change in this regard, and I think this is a subject that deserves a lot of discussion here. In addition, we've got Japan-South Korean divisions, which China might play upon in the trilateral setting, even with in managing some of the economic discussions. If they try to get South Korea on board and Japan is more hesitant because the relations aren't going very well, that could create an atmosphere where we really have a lot of divisiveness. So I think if we are really moving toward a Cold War, and of course we all hope that that won't be the case, and we want to manage it, it's very important to have a greater cooperation and coordination, particularly with South Korea, which might be thought of as on the front line, vulnerable in ways that others aren't because it needs China for North Korea and its economy is so much more dependent on China.
Ambassador Shin, you just mentioned about RCEP and the Korea-China FTA. It might promote it to the RCEP part, and then U.S. is promoting TPP at this moment. So, what would be your own opinion about the Korea's participation in RCEP or TPP?
Well, actually, these two kind of FTA taking place in the two sides is actually is not easy one. I think up till making a certain agreement, it will take a lot of time, and I think most realistic thing is Korea-China, the bilateral FTA, and it is now already ongoing. Maybe its target is the end of next year. If successfully make an agreement between China and Korea, then I think it can make some standard of trilateral FTA between China, Japan, and Korea. And actually, my feeling is that China's attitude is bilateral or trilateral FTA is always thinking of U.S. See, competition with the United States. And TPP, why China is so active in engaging Korea and Japan in FTA scheme is maybe some strategic kind of interest in, see, that always China thinks that U.S. is trying to encircle China and encircle the rising China. So they are a great proponent of the TPP. I think that Japan is at the moment is hedging these two hedging risks, and they are going to be involved in the two sides, TPP at the same time with RCEP and also trilateral FTA. I think it's really, for me, it's quite a change. Japan was very conservative and always didn't move. Even I managed this, when I managed this organization, I feel Japan is too cautious on everything. But this time drastically changed, and coming out to be involved to the FTAs at the same time is a remarkable change. Everything is changing in this area.
Let's go back to our original question that we are just thinking about. In East Asia, we are thinking about Korea, Japan, US, the Trilateral Alliance. And just in case, if we make that kind of alliance, that what would be Chinese response?
This is really a tough question. Anyhow, I'm not on behalf of our government. I think that to observe nowadays China, we should look at several points. The first point is that that is the government side. The second is that the mass from the common people. And the third is that the scholars. Even scholars can be divided into two sides. The first side is that the scholars think that the U.S. pivoted to China, even building the so-called virtue of the alliances among the U.S. and Japan and Korea will be a challenge and a pressure to China. This is one side of the scholar. The other side of the scholar thinks that this is just the imagination, because China was under the control of the Central Committee, the leaders. The leaders does not want to change the policy, because we need the peaceful environment and a stable environment for China to develop. That is the core interest for China. And the second, for the government side, I do not think that the government side thinks that it is the right time, or it is necessary to change or reshape the regional architecture, power architecture of the Asian Pacific region. And for the mass, it is just even if there was something that expressed by Rozman, Professor Rozman, there is a mood, a bad mood toward the war or toward our neighbors as the enemies. That is just through internet. We think that for China, maybe the China's leaders, maybe in the future, one challenge is to control, put the mood or put the populist under the control of the power of the government. That is really a challenge for China. Even domestically, China faced pressure from the lower level of the common people. And diplomatically and related to security issues and foreign relations, the Chinese government also is facing such a pressure. That is common. But it is most important, critical for China's government is how to control, how to put those pressure under the control of itself, its own hand. That is really a problem. It is a challenge. It is a test for the new generation leaders. Thank you.
Okay. Professor Junya, how do you think about this Chinese core interest and Chinese the response toward the formation of our trilateral alliances from Japanese perspective?
Well, from Japanese side, we understand Chinese concern, especially expressed in 2010. That was the time. So we trilateral cooperation moved very forward at that time. But I understand China's concern, but I also understand South Koreans' very cautious stance over this trilateral cooperation. As I mentioned earlier, basically maybe South Korean people don't want U.S.-Japan alliance or U.S.-Japan-South Korea trilateral cooperation. But from Japanese side, the sort of Korean Peninsula contingency or any rising tension on Korean Peninsula is not only the South Korean security matter. This is a very Japanese security issue. So from this perspective, we need a sort of defense cooperation, such as intelligence sharing and logistical support. But at this moment, the logistical support is for the Korean Peninsula. The logistical support is for the third countries, such as Afghanistan or PKO operation. This kind of cooperation is possible, and maybe Chinese government will understand this kind of cooperation between the two countries.
So, Ambassador Shin, you are in the position, so you cannot represent Korea's position toward the trilateral cooperation at this moment. So, I'm Korean, so instead of Ambassador Shin, if I represent the Korean, the situation is actually half a year ago we tried to have a GSOMIA with Japan, but the current government they just pushed to make it, but unexpectedly we just faced with the public. Kind of against public opposition against this kind of mood. So at the time, people they mentioned that Japan they just mentioned about Dokdo issue. They mentioned about comfort to woman issue, and that this kind of issue is still pending. That we cannot make any military cooperation with Japan. There was a public opinion. So after the failure of this kind of movement, I think at the current snapshot situation in Korean public mood it's not a good time to talk about the Korea-Japanese the military cooperation at this moment. So I think we just call it virtual. That means that it's a potential, but it's a long way to go. That is one of the things that we like to mention at this time. Now, I think we are really good at just keeping time. So I'd like to open up our questions to the floor. So if you have any questions or comment on the issue, just please raise your hand. Please, yes.
John Swanson-Wright from Cambridge University. I had a question that I'd like to direct to Professors Rozman and Nishino. Taking Professor Rozman's observation that the Cold War may be on the brink of starting again, in the context of Japanese politics, if one thinks of the Cold War, domestic public opinion has often been a restraint on the more nationalistically minded leaders of Japan. And we've heard a lot today about the dangers of the policies being advocated by Mr. Abe and in particular Mr. Ishihara. In the past, Mr. Ishihara's popularity at home has often been a reflection of public disaffection with mainstream politics and less about foreign policy per se. Do the panelists see a shift at the moment? Is public opinion now increasingly tilting towards these more nationalistic politicians, not because of their stance on domestic political issues, but because of foreign policy concerns?
Why don't you go first? Yes. Thank you for the question. I don't think the Cold War will happen in this region and the major conflict between Japan and China. So the Cold War period, there's a less economic interdependence between Western and Eastern world. But now, especially between Japan and China, we have a very, very economic interdependent situation. And more importantly, Japanese business circle really want a better relation with China. So now I know we now many people pay attention to Abe's so-called manifesto in this coming election. So, but maybe after the election, Abe administration will take a more cautious step because so we remember the just after the Abe's government started in 2006. Prime Minister Abe at that time visited China, and he made an agreement, so-called strategic relationship with China. So in this perspective, so Japanese leaders such as Abe also want a stable relationship with Japan and China. This is my observation.
I have no doubt that business wants improved relations and people want a stable relation. The question is, how have events evolved to lead right now to this 90% or close to that of the Japanese public saying China is unfriendly, record rates, and very great distrust and much greater support for doing something to stand up to this rather than the weak responses previously. So that's the pattern of what's been going on in Japan. And of course, if there is an effort between leaders to manage the situation, as occurred in 2006, when Abe came to power, having already achieved an understanding with the Chinese leadership that he would not go to Yasukuni, that he would visit China, and that they would have an upbeat relationship. And Abe, with Yachi as sort of steering the way, managed that quite well. But there's no indication that's the direction right now. Meanwhile, you've got Ishihara rallying a kind of war mentality from let's get back to the glory of pre-1945 and let's challenge China in every possible way. So I think the public opinion in Japan is confused, it's changed, and even though Abe would come to power with only about a third of the public supporting him, but if Ishihara has another group, it's going to be difficult to manage that. Now if incidents occur, accidents on the sea, and China answers assertively, as it has in previous incidents, this could be inflammatory and the public could get highly aroused. So I don't think we have the situation under control. And it seems to me that Japanese and Chinese leaderships, with a lot of help from the U.S., and I know that the U.S. will be very intent on providing that, will need to sit down and manage it quickly. I don't see the tendency to do that. I think right now both China and Japan are moving in different directions.
Thank you. Chung Xiaoho.
Xiaohe Cheng, from Renmin University of China. One question for Nishino, and also questions for Professor Rozman and Mr. Shin. And we all know from Chinese perspective, Japan's domestic political situations become increasingly conservative. And in face of aggressive and confident China, as Shin mentioned a little bit earlier, and Japan seemingly facilitated its efforts to acquire normal statehood, include remilitarizations. And I'd like to ask you, how fast, from your perspective, and Japanese remilitarizations will achieve in the futures, and how the United States respond to Japan's remilitarizations? Does the United States perceive such kind of efforts as added contribution to consolidated U.S. and Japanese alliance, or as something disturbing? And also, I'd like to ask Professor Shin, how do you see Japan's remilitarizations? Thank you.
Very sensitive issue. So could you answer
Yes,
first? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So your question, the Japanese speed of militarization, maybe partly depends on the result of this coming election. So if not Prime Minister yet, the LDP leader, LDP party will get a single party majority, and if he will make a coalition with over two-thirds majority in both parliament. In this case, he will push his agenda. But we know that we Japanese have another election next summer, so upper house election. Coming Prime Minister Abe will win next upper house election. So without the majority of both parliament, he cannot push his agenda. And because of this, maybe I think he will manage cautiously at first, for the time being, his foreign policy and also his domestic policy. This is my observation.
I've been reading Chinese sources on the remilitarization of Japan and how this links to pre-1945 and the revival of that mentality. It is a distortion of the worst form. There is no remilitarization in Japan. Their budget is 0.9% of the GDP. Their military budget is going up 1% a year. China's military budget is going up double digits each year. Presenting it in that form distorts what's going on in the region and is part of the mutual misperceptions that creates the danger of the Chinese people from the top and from the media and from the academic community being aroused to think that Japan is like it was before 1945, and that's how the Diaoyu issue has been presented too. This is a recipe for creating the Cold War I'm worried about.
Yes. Ren Xiao?
Ren Xiao from China. One fundamental reality is that is a geographical one. That is, China borders more countries than any other country in the world. And therefore, many territorial issues have been left over from history. One fact is that over the years, China has settled many of the disputes one by one with the neighboring countries. And I see it as a big success of building a peaceful and stable neighborhood. But of course, some of the more difficult disputes remain. For example, the one with India, South China Sea and East China Sea. In the case of East China Sea, it was there for at least 40 years. And that dispute did not impede the development of the relationship between China and Japan. The two countries have achieved enormous progresses in terms of their relationship, economically, politically, and so on. Unfortunately, it was provoked by the Japanese politicians. And worse than that, it was worse than that. The Japanese politicians did not and do not have the sensitivities of the issues. So it has become such an issue, a dispute which is bad for both Japan and China. I think it's a comment.
Oh, it's comment, okay. Other questions or comment?
Can I respond?
Sure, please.
Thank you for your comment. So because of former Tokyo Metropolitan Governor Ishihara's very big voice, neighboring countries think Japan is really moving towards the right. But actually at that time, Prime Minister Noda tried to make the situation calm down. This is because of this he purchased 3 of Senkaku Island. This is a very tricky fact, but at that time the Japanese government really tried to handle calmly the situation.
Should I?
Sure, please.
Yes, I do think that both politicians in both countries, especially for Japan, it is their responsibility to be responsible for the booming of the mood of turning right. And maybe it is politicians have the autonomy to control something, and I don't think that the Japanese politicians have take the responsibility to control, put the mood or put the situation under their control. I don't know whether that it is a weak government or something that politicians are willing to go along with the public. I just want to this question for my colleague, Japanese colleague.
Professor Junya, Professor Rozman.
This is something I study a great deal, public opinion, and how opinions are shaped, perceptions, politicians and the public. And I would argue in all of the countries we found the stirring up of national identity intensity, using each other as targets, and Ishihara is the champion of that. But I would argue for the last 4 years, China's writings on Japan changed dramatically from the period of 2006 to 2008, the thaw, the warming, the emphasis, and even before, the Chinese writings were more narrowly focused on the Yasukuni Shrine as Japan's provocation, but not the whole range of criticism of Japan. And one of those criticisms, which has also been directed at Korea, is the alliance system. We had a question before about the alliances. The alliances have been reinterpreted, as I understand in China, in increasingly negative terms as the problem. So this is not a status quo power that says we can get along with the alliances, let's try to figure out some additional multilateral security mechanisms. Increasingly, it's a power that says the alliances are the key to regional insecurity. We've got to do something about these alliances. Now, I know there is a question of timing, and some in China are saying, well, this is not the time to do that, and that's a rash kind of view, but it's the tendency, and really one has to overcome that to stabilize things for the short run, and in particular to say, yes, Japan and China have a territorial dispute. Japan should recognize the existence of the dispute. There should be talks. They should go back, as Nishino-san said, to 2008 and try to figure out ways to work out joint development of resources in the area. But above all, they should deny the tendency of blaming the other in very harsh terms. And I think that's mainly the Chinese responsibility, because Japan now looks as if it's really in the pre-1945 era again.
Okay, Ambassador Shin, do you have any last comment?
Yeah. I think this kind of overall situation in Northeast Asian region is more or less related with the power shift led by China. We know the famous theory of shift of power by Professor Organsky. And the rising country like China at the moment, you see, sometimes when they suppress the existing major power in economically or politically, then there is a high possibility of war broke out. And I think so. This time, China should be you see, restrained and cautious in dealing with your relationship with neighboring countries. We should understand the feeling of the countries which faces a lot of difficulties, who are thinking of the glories, past glories, and now you see declining. So this kind of relationship is existing at the moment in this Northeast Asia. Even I feel it when I manage this newly established organization, small organization. I feel this kind of discomfort between my staffs from China, Japan, and Korea. So I think it's very important for China to show the wisdom of restraint. And also, the professor is also emphasizing the very serious situation in Northeast Asia. I have a little different opinion. I think there was always a kind of disputes between the three countries with regard to the territorial issues and also the issues of history. Still, the three countries couldn't overcome the past history, and Japan says that we already apologized officially by government side a couple of times. Still, how many times should we apologize again? We want to become a normal country. If we feel pain, then from now on, we will say, I'm aching. And so this is always was there. I think that three countries can overcome this difficult. Everybody knows that going to war, or this is really the way which we cannot accept. And I think that the coming Trilateral Summit next year is very important in this sense.
Thank you very much. And we are talking about the virtual alliance among the three countries, China, Korea, Japan, and United States, and China's response. I think the rise of China is continuing, and U.S. is back to East Asia, and Korea and Japan, we are still struggling right now. So I think we need more time to talk about this kind of issue, and that kind of the discussion may resolve the current issues or conflict. Thank you very much.